Welcome to our multimedia video for research skills in politics and international relations.
Our research project focuses on the use of capital punishment in the United States.
This area of policy is one of fervent and contentious debate, and the US is currently the only Western society that practices this form of punishment.
One of the most prominent arguments in favour of the death penalty is that it acts as a deterrent for would-be criminals. Our research was conducted to test this notion.
We examined the 4 federal states of Utah, Iowa, Hawaii and New Hampshire using statistical analysis to see if the death penalty is effective in deterring citizens from committing aggravated murder and other extreme cases of crime.
Our research has particular salience because of its ongoing relevance in the 21st century. Just this year, the death penalty case in Arkansas brought a rebirth to the debate on whether one should support the death penalty or not. In Arkansas, the state decided to execute 8 prisoners on death row between the 17th and the 27th of April. The reason for this was that the drugs used to sedate the prisoners before they were executed would have expired by the end of the month. We thought that other justifications for our research would be that its results could help determine whether capital punishment is worth its costs, as there is a clear consensus in the literature that it is more expensive to send a convict to death row than to house that individual in a prison.
So, by looking at the existing literature, it's apparent that deterrence research is extremely flawed, as there are a lot of factors that have to be considered. The current deterrence effect assumes that murders are rational and calculate risks and rewards, and this is not translated into reality, as some criminals like to act impulsively. Experts such as criminologists unanimously disagree with the death penalty. A 1995 study saw deterrence as the least favourable option to reduce crime rate amongst police officers. The following year, a 1996 survey of 64 criminologists resulted in 56 believing that the death penalty was actually ineffective. On the contrary, Ricardo Gil was sentenced to death in 2005 with a motive to move on to death row, undermining the whole deterrence hypothesis. We also found that a death penalty case is much more expensive in administration costs, attorney costs, and appeal processes than if the case was to be made under life imprisonment. In Oklahoma, a 2004 to 2010 study found that this difference was approximately $110,000. This is something we actually consider when we think about future policy recommendations.
In terms of our methodology, we use the statistical analysis software SPSS to consider whether capital punishment successfully deters citizens from committing crime. We established our independent variable, whether a state uses the death penalty, whilst controlling for factors that we thought would affect crime rates, which were levels of economic inequality and the funding of the relative police departments. We decided to choose George W. Bush's second term for our data range because crime statistics were easily available. We chose 2 sets of states, Utah, which enacts the death penalty, and Iowa, which does not, and both states had similar levels of economic inequality and a similar number of police officers per 1,000 citizens. The other states were New Hampshire and Hawaii, which again both had similar levels of economic inequality, however have higher ratios in numbers of police officers to citizens. We then used the Uniform Crime Reporting Statistics aggregated by the FBI to collect our data and used a test to compare the mean crime rates between the states.
Between all 4 states, the murder rate was not affected by the death penalty. However, between New Hampshire and Hawaii, it was. Conversely, between Utah and Iowa, the murder rate was actually higher in the state with the death penalty than the one without, though this was not a significant difference. What this suggested to us was that even if the death penalty does have a deterrent effect on would-be murderers, it's not enough to decrease the crime rate due to the importance of external factors. While we couldn't disprove the deterrent effect, we did find convincing evidence that it is not the most important factor determining the murder rate within a state.
We have 3 policy implementations that we can recommend from our research. Firstly, any future changes in the direction of capital punishment in America should be taken very cautiously at national level. This is because it involves several conflicting interest groups, and national abolition of the death penalty would satisfy religious groups who preach the sanctity of life, yet however this could further anger the families of the victims involved in aggravated murder cases.
Secondly, our research strongly suggests that capital punishment is expensive and perhaps its funding may actually benefit from being invested elsewhere, such as in rehabilitation clinics, extra police officers on the streets, or even tougher penalties for aggravated murder cases.
Thirdly, whilst our study did not reach a definitive conclusion in terms of a yes-no answer, it has highlighted that future research on deterrence needs to be broader and more intensive. There are so many confounding factors at play, whether it be urban poverty or even the weather, as we learned from a 1990 study.
Therefore, we urge any future research to consider these factors, especially whilst trying to quantify them. Thank you for watching our video research presentation.